Hi, this is Dr. Dan Klein, and today's webinar is going to be about consumer behavior. Many people overlook consumer behavior because it sounds very theoretical, but it's really important to understand consumer behavior to be able to put it into practice with your business. So just bring the screen up that I can start sharing this information with you. There's a little bit about me. I welcome you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for Dr. Dale Klein, and you can get to my LinkedIn page, see what I've done and what I'm doing right now. So moving on to customer behavior. First, before you understand your products, you really need to understand your consumers. And I guess it sometimes goes hand in hand that, what are people actually looking for? I come across many entrepreneurs that choose to start a business and they really don't do enough market research to see if the customers actually want the idea that they're thinking about putting together and selling to them. So hence the first question I ask you is, who are your consumers? Who are your customers? Are they men? Are they women? Are they between the ages of 15 and 18? Are they children? What socioeconomic background do they come from? What is their income level? Where do they live? How do they access information about your business? There's a whole bunch of things to look at, demographics and psychographics, which we're not going to go into right in this webinar. We'll do it in another webinar. We're going to look at some other things around consumer behavior. But this aspect of really who are your consumers, and there's so much information out there now that you can do a lot of online market research in regards to your particular country, state, city, even suburb. To a certain extent, due to the onset of big data. So once you understand who your consumers are, then you need to look at, well, what makes people buy? And I like to look at my own behavior of why do I buy certain things at a certain period of time as well. And I think that's something you can look at as well, as what triggers you to buy some information. So you need to understand the buyer's mental process. What is their practicality? What's their rationale in buying something? What's the psychological premise of their purchase behaviors? What's that emotion, that need that they just got to have this? There's various techniques to improve your selling efforts, which we'll have in future webinars as well. And what factors influence the purchases buying decisions? And then ask the who, what, where, when, and how, all around that individual's buying behavior. So, like, who is buying? Who do they talk to see if it's a wise decision to purchase that product or service? What are they buying? Where are they buying it? Are they buying it online, offline? How far are they willing to travel to acquire that product or service? When do they purchase? Do they purchase in the morning, the afternoon, night, weekends, weekdays? All these questions. And once again, how do they buy it? In regards to today's purchasing power, do they pay cash? Do they pay credit card? Do they pay via BPay, PayPal? There's so many options today, and that's what you have to find out so you can better service that client when they're coming to your website or you're coming to your, in a sense, brick and mortar location. Maslow's a fantastic diagram, I feel, because he's been around for so long and he's really a great steady Eddie, I would say. And almost every class that I teach, whether it's at the Wise Academy or when it's at Kaplan or any institution I've taught for, sure enough, Maslow's hierarchy of needs come up. And this is when you can put your product or service into Maslow's hierarchy, then you can understand a little bit about that person's buying behavior or that motive, which we'll talk a bit later, of why they want your product or service. So those base needs, the physical base needs is, we all need food and water, shelter, we need sleep. So body functions are really important. So when our body doesn't respond or react or even work appropriately for us to be able to have our day-to-day functionality, that becomes really important that we want to purchase it. And unless we have those physical needs, food, water, shelter, that sense of home or homeostasis, you can see that word there as well, we really don't think about anything else. I know myself, I've gone through some things in my lifetime where, I couldn't find a place to live, or I was just struggling on various personal matters, but it was, financial of where am I going to get my food? Where can I live? And once I had that sorted, I couldn't really think of anything else in regards to friendships or relationships or family or, those types of things. So going up that scale. So I would suggest to you that after this webinar, you look at your own product and service and figure out how does that satisfy an individual's needs. Maybe you're working at that self-actualization level, where it's that spontaneity, acceptance of facts, morality, that identifies a particular group of people that are searching to get to that level. Esteem, love, belonging. It's quite interesting when we look at dating sites. People, they'll go to that to look for that friendship and that sexual intimacy, that family. And there's that need because, it is a human need that we want to have friends. We want to have that sense of belonging. So if you have a dating site, it probably will fit in that love and belonging section. So once again, simple diagram, been around for ages. I still think it's very applicable in today's environment. The other thing to look at are the group influences on buying decisions. Now, I'll briefly go over these, and I want you to consider the influences that groups have on the buying decisions, especially if you have an online business. In today's online environment, people can, suggest to go someplace, not go someplace, and, we can talk about influencers, etc., and how that has an impact on people's buying decisions. So when we look at the role influence, these are the expected behaviors of those in a particular position. So, your role as a mother, as a father, as a husband, as a wife, as a child. We all play various roles on a day-to-day basis. And this is where you have to look at your consumers, is what role are they playing at a given point in time that is in relationship to your product or service. The reference group. Okay, so the reference group influences are those categories that you belong to which you habitually compare yourself, right? We all, hopefully, those who are on the webinar, have a reference group that they habitually just basically resonate with and can communicate with. And you might go to them for various decisions, or even for your own buying behavior. The social class, so those that have similar values, that could be also looking at the level of income, high level, high income, low income, middle income, and how does that influence your purchasing behavior? If you're in that high net worth category, or you're focusing your target market is those who are in that high net worth category, they will speak a different language, they will talk differently with each other, they also have different influences on each other as well. And then the last group of influences are your cultures and your subculture. And when we look at this, it's not just about ethnicity or the various common languages, but it's also in a sense, the tribal kind of culture. So for example, years ago when skateboarding came around, it was very big. You had a skateboarding community, but there was also like this subculture. And you see this in various activities where there's a particular subculture, or what you can almost call as underground, that you have the overarching, but then there's other subcultures within it that speak the different language. They have a different resonance with each other. And you need to also look at that. And how does that influence people's purchasing behavior within that group? And many times businesses overlook the influence of that. And it becomes very apparent, especially more so now when we have so much online conversations going. And you need to observe what people are saying in that online environment. The pain and pleasure response, all right? Years ago, one of my mentors, he really harped on this, and it really does make sense. And I use this in many of my classes as well, is that we change because of two things. And think of your own why you change. We either have massive pain, where we try to avoid it, or we have massive pleasure, which we pursue. So where does your product or service fit? Are you providing a solution so that people will not feel the pain anymore? Or are you providing some more pleasure that they're trying to pursue that pleasure? So you'll see on travel destinations, it's really heightening, get away and feel good and experience luxury. So people are pursuing that time away to feel good, to re-energize, to where that massive pain, the good one is always to look at drug companies, where they will say, well, if you take this, the pain will actually go. I mean, that's a very simple exercise or a simple example. But look at your own product and service and where does that fit in? Because once again, when you understand that, that's going to assist you in developing the copy for any kind of advertising that you do in the future. There's two types of motivation, very similar to the previous slide of pain and pleasure. People will go towards, so they have this toward motivation. They'll say, I love to, or I want to, it's moving forward. When it's about away from, okay, that in a sense a negative, they'll say, I have to, I should, my spouse wants me to. And even energetically, you can hear it in their voice of that angst. I love to do this, I want to do this, right? There's a positivity behind it versus that away from, oh, I know I should. And you can almost hear it in their voice, even the energy underneath, like they really don't want to, but they kind of have to out of duty. Once again, where does your product or service fit in? Is it part of the conversation of people going towards something, or are they wanting to use your product moving away from something? The buyer's decision-making process, every decision, every purchase that we go through, I'm sure we go through this without really cognitively knowing that we're going through this. So the first thing is this buyer awareness, is how do we get that buyer to know that we exist? And in today's very cluttered society, it becomes quite difficult. So we have to become very clever in doing this. And one of the ways, and it's not even about being clever, it's really understanding the consumer behavior, the consumer mindset of how you're going to get into their mind, into their brain, to even consider that your product and service is something of being worthwhile. That need recognition, going back to that pain and pleasure model, is, how are you going to position that they really need that? That they go, you know what, that's exactly what I need, and I will continue to go and look for that information. So that collecting information phase, your ad may be the trigger for that. So they'll look at your stuff and go, well, let's see what else is about. And then they'll do that comparison, and that's where that evaluate and access the information comes about. And then obviously the buyer gets to the decision making process to where they actually purchase the product and service, hopefully yours. And then after they purchase it, it's that post-purchase dissonance where they really evaluate, am I happy or am I not happy? Would I repurchase this? And in today's world, when we have so many social media platforms such as Facebook, people will more than likely express their discontent with a product or service more so than a positive experience. And unfortunately, we've seen this in word of mouth advertising. Statistics haven't changed very much from a percentage standpoint, but percentage wise, more people will share their disdain or their unhappiness than their happiness to the crowd. And in today's world, when you have a crowd of millions, sometimes billions, depending on your network, that can go quite viral. And it can either be good for your brand or it can be shocking for your brand. It can really destroy it. When we look at buying decisions, again, we have three basic buying decisions. We have the routine, the limited, and extensive. In our routine buying decisions, we will buy those pretty much on a regular basis, such as toilet paper. We don't think too much about it. So the involvement of the buyer is quite low. It's like, okay, we'll just go through the supermarket and there's a toilet paper, there's the paper towels, there's the soap, and there's usually not much thought goes into that decision making. Then we might have limited buying decisions. So this is where there might be moderate involvement. Buying clothes is one, depending on how much the clothes are, is, just say regular clothes. You'll look, is the color right? Does it fit right, etc. But it's not, some people may not take a lot of time in that buying decision. And when we look at the extensive buying decision, it's looking at that high involvement. So usually if it's a more expensive purchase, there's going to be more buying decisions within it. So such as a car, most people will take their time in buying a car, looking at the price, looking at the features, looking at the benefits that might include warranties or servicing. They'll be much more engaged and involved with that. So once again, look at your own product and service and determine where does it fit in these buying decisions of your consumers. Now we go to the buyer motives. Think about your motivations in buying a particular product or service. And this is where your customers will be going through the same thing. Are the motives coming from an emotional space? And is that emotional space of fear, of vanity? There's many people in the world that have the emotion of vanity. They want to look good, right? Especially with so many online presence today. The love of family, personal pleasure or self-gratification. There's many emotional buying motives, happy, sad, angry. Some people may buy out of anger for whatever reason, depending on your product or service. Rational buying motives. So are they buying something based on security, buying for unqualified prospects, or dependent, is it gift, housekeeping? So that rationality of that. The patronage. So they may buy just because of the competence of the salespeople, maybe a level of loyalty to the company, maybe to you. That might be another buying motive as well. And then last is product buying motives. And that's where looking at that brand preference, the price, the quality. So all those various features that are wrapped around that product. Why are they buying it? Is it something that they will rather pay a little bit more for the quality because they may not have to replace it over a period of time? So once again, look at this slide and determine where is your product or service in that buyer motive. Why would they want to buy your motive? Once again, going back to what we spoke about before, is it based on the hierarchy of needs, which we talked about, and then these motives of the emotional, the rational, the patronage, and also the product. Perceptions. One of my colleagues many years ago, he always said perception was reality. And even though at that point in time in my early career, I somewhat disputed it, now as I've matured and got more experience, I tend to agree that perception is the reality. And probably even more so today in our world of the internet and social media. In buyer perception, they'll be using the five senses if they have access to the five senses. Now, technology today, at least I have not experienced that we can't smell a product online, but I'm sure in the future we will probably get to that point where we can. So when you are doing your advertising or your promotion, is how can you engage the five senses? And our perception is also influenced by what you say and how you say it. And this is quite interesting too, if you're sending out email, is that tonality. And I know that friendships have been lost because of the tone of an email sometimes, and you can also lose your customers because the tone or the perceived tone of an email. What's the quality of your presentation? What's the consumer's acquired knowledge? What is their beliefs and their attitudes? What are their likes and dislikes? And the cultural differences. Now, I've been teaching at an international school the past few years, and it's been just an amazing experience because I very rarely have an Australian in the class, and if I do, it's usually only one. But I have people from China and Taiwan and Pakistan and India and Hungary, like all over the world, and it's really interesting to have this firsthand knowledge and with them. And a lot of times we're talking about marketing and what their perceptions are about different countries, nationalities, lifestyles, etc. And when you get to understand that and you can tap into it, it helps you have much better marketing material and copy. Once again, it does come back to making sure that you really know your target market as well. Benefit selling is also important because now that you have the foundation of how are these people thinking, what are they looking for, then we have to satisfy, what do we have to do to satisfy the needs and the wants of the customers? And sometimes they call it WIIFM, or what's in it for me, right? If they don't feel that they're getting something out of it, then they're probably not going to buy it, right? I think throughout this whole internet experience over the past 20 years, people have become more focused on what's in it for me. Because if they can't get satisfied in a short period of time, especially with this younger generation, they'll just bounce off and find somebody who can satisfy their desire or their need through a product or service very quickly. So when we look at benefit selling, part of it can be the features, but I like to look at this reverse, is that the favorable result is that the buyer receives. So we need to focus on the benefits, like really, how is this going to help you? Once you can tap into that, because it's about solving problems. And if you can help them solve that problem and give them the benefit and show those advantages, then you can actually look at the features. So even though I have FAB there, sometimes I think it might be better to be BAF, right? To focus on the benefits first, the advantages, and then you can focus on the features. At the end of the day, though, when you're really actually making the sale, the most important thing is to actually listen to the potential buyer. So then you can solve their problem by listening and then tapping in to are they looking for the benefits? Are they looking for a particular feature? Because maybe if they're buying a refrigerator, it has to fit in their kitchen, and then looking at the advantages. And in today's world, we have the advantage that we can show those proof of benefits where we can use anecdotes and examples, and we can various comparisons and statistics and testimonials as well. And you can increase the buyer's satisfaction or happiness by a number of different ways. You can show them how to use the product properly. You can be realistic about the outcomes. Honesty is the best policy. Trust becomes very, very important in today's world in doing business. You can give positive assurances on quality and performance, and follow up on the sale and answering, just asking the question, are you happy? Is the buyer happy? So to finish off, just an overall reminder, before you understand your products, you really need to understand the customer. And when I say products, I also mean products or services, right? So I thank you for your time and attention. for this webinar, and I'm happy to take any questions as we close this webinar. Thank you.